This episode is sponsored by DroneWorks Ireland, your go-to place when it comes to buying a drone, repairing a drone, and also when you need professionals to carry out any aerial work you may need. Check out their website at www.droneworksireland.ie. You're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. So a massive win for the Galway senior hurlers at the weekend against Kilkenny, an 18-point victory. Galway ran out 35 points to 17-point winners over Kilkenny at the weekend in Pearse Stadium on Saturday evening. Kilkenny's biggest defeat since 1954. I'm joined by Joe Hession to look back on Galway's victory. Joe, there's probably disbelief, I think, in one sense, coming out Saturday evening of the margin Galway won by. I don't think any of us expected that. But then huge pride, I think, as well, because we probably all came away last year with frustration. But it already feels like in 2026, you can look at this team and you can see a style and what's beginning to happen now.
Yeah, Paul, look, I think thanks for having me on first off. Leaving the stadium on Saturday evening, I think there was a genuine positive buzz, about the team and the performance. You know, the scoreline was, for a Galway supporter or person to be looking up at the scoreboard and see the margin of victory. It was huge and something we're not used to, but I think there's optimism there, and you could sense that in the people walking out of the terraces and that on Saturday evening, and within reason, we know where we're coming from and the work that needs to be done and the body of work that needs to be done by the management. But I think any genuine, real supporter that's been at the matches has seen the progress the lads have made, on the pitch and the management as well. Off the pitch, you can see the work that's gone in. You can see the detail of what they're doing and what they're trying to do. So huge optimism, leaving the stadium and knowing that, you took on one of your biggest rivals in Leinster. You dismantled them. You stayed on top. You were consistent all through, and couldn't be put happy as a supporter leaving the stadium Saturday night.
For us as supporters, it's good in one sense to get carried away at the minute, and let's enjoy this. But considering the misery we've had against Kilkenny over the last few years, I don't think this is any harm at all.
No, not at all. And that is our job, isn't it, as supporters to get carried away, and it's up to the lads and the management to keep the lads grounded. But they're not going to be listening to us. But it is. Look, of course, Kilkenny, Kilkenny, and they have this trait of never die and never give up. And when they're on top of you, they'll drive for home and they'll bury you. And we turned the table Saturday night. When we were on top, we didn't let the foot off the gas. We wanted more, and you saw that when the subs came in. I think did all the subs
Yeah.
score maybe when they came in, and that's huge. They got the message from the sideline, and I'm sure me all had a word with them, but even they probably watched the lads out the pitch and said, I want to be part of this. I want to be on the field, to do this. And I'm sure it wasn't discussed even after, but I'm sure, inside every player's mind, they said, I want this. We're going to do this. We're on top now. We're going to stay on top. We're going to see this out, and they did. You know, um, you know, we've been wounded enough by them to for us to inflict that was quite pleasant. Will it mean a lot in championship? Probably not. It probably gives our guys confidence, the confidence they need to show when they hurl, to that standard and that pace and intensity, what they can get from it, the rewards they get from it. So, for a management point of view, I'm sure they were delighted. But for us supporters, we were in heaven, on Saturday.
For Kilkenny, obviously Derek Ling did mention there was a bug in the camp. You have Mikey Butler, Tita Reid, and Adrian Mullen to come back into it for championship. But has there ever been a performance like this for Galway this early in the year? I was trying to think back, and I suppose for Galway to hand out a hammering like this, it hasn't been for quite a while, really.
No, no, definitely not. I certainly can't. We've had ups and downs in the league the last couple of years, really. And I suppose the biggest thing, and I know, well, it's probably the drum he's banging, is consistency. Um, but we haven't had consistency over the last 5-6 years, where we could go maybe build gradually and then go and put in a performance like that, full of confidence and full of work and endeavour. So, no, to have a performance like that was definitely something we probably haven't seen in a long time. Um, and to see it all unfold, and the way they went about it, with confidence and the communication out in the pitch, you could see it from the stand and from the terraces, the way the players were communicating and talking to other through the game and all that. That's stuff that management just, will be really, really pleased with. That this is how the team is developing so quickly, I suppose quickly in the sense that what is it, it was our fifth game or whatever in the league or whatever it was. Um, but I suppose the signs were there in the consistency levels. The effort that went into the Tip game, the Cork game. You know, Offaly. I listened to Neil after that, and he would have been disappointed how they fell off a little bit, but still, job was done. There was consistency in what they did. Waterford went about their business against them very efficiently, and then the last night was just from start to finish, and every player contributed and had their moments and did some really good stuff. So to have that so early in the year, is huge. And it's obviously testament to the body of work that's gone into the lads, from the management and from the coaching staff, and the players themselves that have bought into it and are implementing it, obviously in training, and be able to bring it into a match. And that is quite pleasing for everyone.
I thought the big positive was, and Michal was talking to us after the game, and he was talking about how he's pleased with the efficiency. But I went back through the games over the last two seasons. The only previous time Galway have beaten the 30 point mark was 627 against Antrim last year in the Leinster Championship. To hit 35 points, I think it's a real positive. Obviously, we mentioned Championship only 5, 6 weeks away at the minute, but it's going to be vital to be hitting past that 30 point mark when it comes into summer, because that's obviously we've even seen with Limerick and previous All Irelands. It's a mark you have to be surpassing.
Yeah, I think you're right, Paul. I think obviously at the start of the year, I think the guy manager would have sat down and looked at the boxes they need to get ticked and get to, and definitely efficiency and scoring chances was one of them. And you've nailed it there. Like you look at Limerick, Cork, Tipperary, those teams over the last couple of years, they're hitting 30, 28, 30 points, 32 points, throwing a goal here and there as well. That's where you need to be now to win these, high intensity games, these, games that are played at 100 miles an hour. Taking your scoring chances, creating them first off and taking them are huge. And Galway did that, Saturday evening and did it very well, especially in the first half against a significant wind. They controlled the game quite well and got confidence from stretching 3, 4, 5, 6 points ahead and took good scores. And Aaron was fairly clinical from the freeze as well. So all that added up. But 100% you're right, Paul, because to get these scores, you've got to keep working at it and building and practicing it, and it comes in games, and these are the games you want to target. And I've no doubt they'll be looking for similar against Limerick, and they'll have their own targets, and each player will have their targets, and but as a management, they'll be wanting to hit that, time and time again, and more.
What was the most impressive aspect for you, Joe, on Saturday evening with the Galway performance?
I thought the link play was super in the middle third, Paul. I thought some of their passing, their movement, and small things like the communication. There was a couple of times the ball broke down, and you could see players going to maybe the guy that had lost possession and just having a word with him and pointing things out. I just that side of it was massively impressive for me, just to see how Pádraig and Cahill, the two managers took control of it. Ronan Glennon was doing a good bit of talking to different guys, to Keane Daniels and those guys that didn't have the experience, but these guys were willing to talk to them. And that can all be done in the dressing room, but to see it happen out in the pitch in the heat of the battle, was very important because that can be needed in the Leinster Championship. But I thought some of the play, the link play was, guys weren't afraid to take on their man, and when they did, there was a guy off the shoulder to take the next pass, and it just didn't stop there. There was another guy gone further ahead to take the next ball, and that type of stuff, the ball was always given to the guy in the better position, to the shooter, recycle ball, get it back out. You know, there was no pot shots as such. One or two maybe Tom Anna might have been disappointed with, but he was entitled to probably to have the shot. They just didn't the accuracy let him down at the time. But everything else was calculated and worked, and I think that side of it, the team play was super. And that said, like when you're like this is a relatively new team because we five or six new guys playing that probably weren't playing, you know, as many games last year. So to have that, and it all looked quite seamless at times where guys knew where each other was and they knew their roles. So, you could see that it was coming together. And that was the pleasing aspect as a supporter to see the enthusiasm of the players to want to go and play and to hurl and to win the game.
I thought what was really impressive was it looks quite simple, but the two or three hand passes, um, really close together, and it seemed like it was nearly a tactic if they were deploying Tiernan Killeen midfield, but he was going to drop deep and be those link passes, and like the touch and everything there is so crucial, but they really did it impressively to break out of defence and work that short game.
100%. And it's like I said there previously, it was turning to get it, and then it was the next pass. There was a runner coming off the shoulder from deep, and then there was another option. And at the same time, they still had the option of the long ball. And we seen that when Jason Rabbit came on. I think he would got two or three, where they still weren't afraid to go in long if they had to, or into Conor Whelan. So absolutely, that takes a lot of conditioning, a lot of you know your touch has to be right, your confidence. But I think, Paul, I think the Galway players ooze that, for whatever reason on Saturday evening. They back themselves to go and play the game. They have confidence in how they want to play, and you can see it suits the players that are out on the pitch at the moment. They're very comfortable doing it. It breaks down a few times as well. But I've no doubt the management have told the players it will break down. We're going to get turned over every so often, and I'm sure they have a system in place for that when they do break down. Defensively how they set up. You know, but you can't take away the encouragement from the players to go and play the game. And it's a game that I think is suiting them at the moment. There's energy in it, and you could even see that probably touching it again when the substitutes that came in, they added to it as well. And I look at you come into a game like that and you're so far ahead, it's hard not to. But the game, we didn't peter out, we didn't take the foot off, we pushed on even more. And that was shown when they came on and they all contributed to the scoreboard.
It's the positivity too with a short game, isn't it? Like we see sometimes maybe the short game might break down and maybe teams that play the short game mightn't commit as many bodies forward, but God do, in fairness, and even when they're playing this short game, it's all forward.
All forward, yeah. I think I took note of the last. I think maybe Porrick was the only one that didn't pass maybe the halfway line. The rest of them were free to go. Maybe Killian Chairs mightn't have a whole lot either because he's further back. But the rest of them are, Ian, Josh, Darren Morrissey. They're more than happy to go. And but you've seen that in their game at club level as well, Paul. If you've watched these guys at club level, they're attacking players. Um, they want to go, and it suits them. They're confident in doing it. They're physically able to take a tackle. They have the skill set to offload in the tackle or when they come out of the tackle. But they do want to go. But then you see the defensive side of Killian Traers and Joshua Ryan, like their one-on-one defending is top notch. For such young guys. So yeah, they're encouraged to go, and it suits them to go. But scores can come from anywhere. And like if you're the opposition, you're saying, where do I go? Where do I, who do I follow? Who do I tag? And when the game is played at such a frantic pace, it's very hard to pass on someone. So if you're picking up Cathal Mannion at six and he goes down the pitch and then he comes in a wave, it's very hard to pass him on to someone if the game is frantic and open. And Galway seem to like a little bit of chaos and frantic and, get the right people on the ball at the right time.
You talked there about Kieran and Joshua in the corners. Like that game will give Joshua so much confidence, even as we go into the summer, because holding Mossy Keown scoreless, it has to give him loads of confidence. Even Kieran Hanrahan, I, I think the majority of people have said he was probably the best hurler in the club championship last year with his performances, and then you go on to see what he did against Lough doing such a good man marking job on Brendan Rodgers. these fellas are so disciplined, but like they're going to attack the ball straight away when whoever they're marking. But it's their ability to go forward as well, which I suppose makes it such a nuisance if you are a corner forward marking either of them.
Oh, a corner forward's nightmare, I think, because they will play you from the side, or even from the front, because they'll back their skill set, their ball winning ability. As I said, they're defensively very good in one v ones because they have, they have such good feet that they're able to, they're able to manage you, to shepherd you, to hold you, to tackle you. So and they're full of confidence. And I've said that before. Like, you know, they're they're willing to go and play the game that they're comfortable to do. And Mihal and the lads have facilitated that. They're saying, go and play this game. But that breeds confidence into a team when you see guys like this, young guys. I'm sure that's given a lift to the older guys to see these guys so enthusiastic, being on the ball, making the odd mistake, but they still go to the next ball like they went to the last one, even though they might have made a mistake because they back themselves all the time. And that's what you've got to do. You look at the top teams, you know, all these players back themselves. They believe they're better than their marker, and they don't dwell on it. If they make a mistake, they go for the next ball, and that's their job.
Killian Trayer's your own club man there. You probably always knew he was destined for this from a young age, but it's injuries have obviously played his part. He probably would have been here sooner, I think, if it wasn't for injuries. I think people probably forget that he actually played wing back last year against Clare in the league
Mm.
and then got a nasty injury, which really, I think, affected him last season. And he didn't even look out of place last year when he did play wing back, but he just looks so comfortable at this level.
Yeah, he is. Killian is, obviously from my own club, so you're always going to talk highly of your own guys, but he's a real talent. I worked with him one year here in the club at Minor, and I suppose even then you could see, I've said this to a few people, like hurling wise and what he does on the ball. And I probably said this to you before as well, Paul. Is probably the closest thing to Dahi that I've worked with or seen. He's just his composure and his level headedness and his skill set, his physicality. It all comes together for him. And such a nice guy as well, such a good guy. Grounded guy. But to see him getting a right run of games, and that's down to probably the work he's put in, through the S&C guys that are there at obviously at club level and at intercounty level. That he's managing his body. He's doing the right things, and I know his dedication to it is top notch. So, but to see him get a run of games and to fulfill his potential, and and to nail down a position that's quite hard to nail down. I'm not saying it's nailed down, sorry, but like he has definitely done everything right or everything that's asked of him from anyone that's gone in on top of him. He's dealt with them all, whether physically, hurling wise, and look at that. That you'd expect nothing else of him, and that's he'll just go about his business in a nice, quiet, calm manner, and hopefully the injuries will stay away. He's obviously doing all the right things, and we'll see when the summer comes and the ball is flying even faster. Killian will just raise it another level, hopefully. So we'll look forward to that as well. Just delighted to see him getting a run without any injuries.
With this full back line playing so well at the minute, it probably made the management not think of playing Darren Morrissey in the half back line, but then obviously he gets injured against Tipperary, and he comes back from injury. And since Morrissey and Glennon have, I suppose, played consistently in the half back line this year, I think it's really seemed to give those two players a new lease of life.
And of course, yeah, you can see the work they're putting in, and the way they want to play again. It probably suits how the management seem to want to play. Guys that can carry a ball or good on the ball, can break a tackle. Um, but yeah, they've got a new lease of life. They're in new positions. They're involved in the play a bit more. Both guys, I think, like that. Even when you watch them at club level, they want to be on the ball. They want to be in the game. They're talkers. So really, yeah, I think those two moves is just freshen them up. And plus, Paul, they're hurting well because they're probably looking over their shoulder at guys that might have been here and got injured, or guys that have yet to come back from injury, and they're saying we've got to perform every day we go out because this panel is getting very competitive. So if you don't have this, if you don't keep the standards that you've set or the team have set or the guy in front of you has set, then chances are you won't hold your position. So that's brilliant for the team and to make guys better, whether you're the young guy coming in or the older guy that's there. If there's someone driving you on from the sidelines, then it's the best motivation of all.
I think one player that's probably went under the radar, Keane Daniels, for a player who has didn't play minor under 20 coming up, and to just get called in on the back of his performances with Tommy Larkins this year throughout the championship. And when I was watching it in the first half, when he goes to do that flick, I was disappointed in one sense it didn't come off because it would have just been an unbelievable score.
Yeah, it was. You were willing him just to have that moment. And he's grown into the league. Like Offaly, he was steady. Found Waterford much better. And the last day again, and took a lot of ball, Paul, on Saturday even under pressure.
Yeah,
Where he might have miscontrolled the first one, but it never hit the ground. He was still able to keep it alive, but at the same time, always going forward. And you could see the players trust him and know how he wants to play because anytime we went forward in the first half against the Breeze, he was involved in a lot of it, and breaking the tackle and runners off his shoulder. So yeah, he's again another guy that's grown into this role. He's getting confidence from the games he's getting, getting used to it, the pace of the game, and that's going to keep, the pace of the game is going to keep going up as pitches dry out and we hit championship, in Limerick obviously in a week and a half's time. But like you really have to be pleased with him. He's adding to the panel, he's adding to the team.
it's
Again,
particularly the physicality in the middle third though with him, isn't it?
middle third, and he is a big man. He's a big man. He's mobile. He's strong. He can take a tackle. He can give a tackle. But he has good ball skills. He's able to play hurling. He's well able. He's well capable. And his confidence will only grow from getting these games.
Absolutely. I know you talked about it there earlier, but it is a good point in fairness. Even then, before the game, Darmar say opts to go against the Breeze, and you'll always sort of wonder if it works out, it's a great decision, and if it doesn't work out, you'd probably come back and question it. But in fairness, for Galway to play against the Breeze, in that first half against Kilkenny, and to be in such a commanding lead really against that Breeze at 15-9 at half time, there was so much to even like, because obviously there is that bit more, I suppose, work and I suppose grit you have to do against the Breeze, particularly in Pearse Stadium.
Oh, there is, of course, there is. Yeah, so it was. They obviously backed themselves, but I think, Paul, if you've watched the number of games, I think our starts have been quite good. Even the Cork game, we sprinted out of the traps. Offaly, obviously Waterford. So I think that's something they might have looked at. That maybe, regardless with or against the wind, this is how we're going to start. This is what we're going to do. Implement our game. And sometimes, Paul, to play the game they're playing into the wind, you're kind of forced to do it. So there could be a tendency if you're not used to playing it and you have the wind that you're letting the ball go very quickly, or too quick, maybe a pass or two too early. So when you're against the Breeze, maybe you've got to carry it further. So that helps the type of game that they played the last night. Where they wanted to carry the ball at least to the opposition 45 to have a shot or whatever they were doing. Um, but also on that, Paul, like I think your thoughts, like I thought Kilkenny were quite naive. Like they gave us short puck out after short puck out to let us build our attacks, and I'm sure that's not lost in the Galway management either, how easy it was to get out of defence in the first half, against the Breeze, when like there was times when Derek had two, three options with a puck out, where he was able to get it maybe to his half back. And the next thing, one more pass, and you were gone into midfield, and that like Kilkenny definitely didn't help themselves with that. I thought they were naive on that side of it. But there was when they did push on occasion, we were still able to bring it into the tackle, have a man on the shoulder, two passes, we were up the pitch, So whilst in the second half I thought Kilkenny laboured a little bit and maybe at three passes they still weren't at midfield, So Galway were always able to set because it was a bit slower. But I thought Kilkenny were naive in how they let us come out so easily. But playing against the Breeze, I think with the game we played on Saturday, it probably suited to play against the Breeze because we were in control of the ball. We were these short passes, as you said earlier, two, three passes, and then you could release a shot in or have a shot at a score. That was, and against the Breeze, I think that suited us. But it was brave, and I think as we piled on the scores, you could see the confidence growing in guys, um, and they just went about their business. It probably became routine. This is how we're training. This is what we're doing. It was a continuation of that.
This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. To play devil's advocate in that opening period, like there was stages where we just had so much time on that ball and we were able to work it. But there was stages I felt where we could have nearly worked it in even further. And I suppose when you're on top like that, work one or two of those goal chances.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. That's the learnings they'll take from it. Like we're all here talking about the plus 30 points and win it by so much and whatnot. But there'll be work ons, like of course there will be. Like, yeah, could the ball have been delivered in a bit quicker? Could have. Now probably the first half, sometimes against the breeze, it's held up a bit more, so it's a
Mm.
little bit easier for the defender. I think I saw a difference anyway when Jason Rabbit came on. I think it became more direct under the stand where to Jason, where it was a little bit faster, and even to Connor. I think Connor Whelan won one or two as well before Jason came on or when Jason came on. So I think in the second half they did, maybe for the last 15 minutes it was a little bit more direct. And I think we did create maybe one or two flittering chances where we could have had goals. But certainly there'd be work on Paul. They'd be saying, can we create more? Can we, when we're in on those positions, what's the trigger that we're going to go for goal? That type of stuff. That's still going to take a bit of time, and that's what these games are about.
I think it's 6 goals in 5 games so far. So obviously they will want to get that maybe goal return up because it will be needed as the year goes on.
Yeah, I think so. But I think from the game we play, if you look at what we're doing between the two 45s, we're possibly only leaving maybe two inside. So,
Yeah, I
going down,
it was
going
one
down,
it was one a lot on
yeah,
Saturday, but it was the thing that impressed me in one sense was it might have been one, but it was being changed so much it was hard for Kilkenny to get to grips with.
100%, 100%. And I think that's exactly it. There was a constant flow of different players, whether it was Connor Whelan, it was Jason Burke, it was Rory Burke. They moved us all the time. They kept guys moving around. And as I just go back to it, like when you have two inside, maybe it's a little bit harder. But these are all things that these are all work-ons. We will see these things develop and evolve and change. The Galway won't be set on one pattern of play. You'd imagine they'll have different roles for different guys. For now, Paul, it's probably about developing a style of play to a point, and then it's also marrying in different players, developing players. Can we develop a squad? Like, what have they 31 or 32 players used in the league? You know, Everyone has probably put their hand up for the championship. So, as well as getting the results the last couple of games, we've also developed a panel, and with that will come different roles for different guys in different games, in different styles.
I think the most pleasing thing, if you look at the second half as a whole, particularly for the management team, probably against Waterford and Offaly in particular in those games, you're expecting Galway to maybe push on, and maybe they didn't at stages in the second half in those games, but even the start of the second half, 7 points in a row. Uh, then Kilkenny come back, and then as we mentioned, all the subs coming in, scoring a point as well. It's I suppose they're the big positives really from the second half.
That was obviously their target at half time, that we don't take the foot off here, that the first 10 minutes are crucial, and you go out and you do what we did in the first half. We play our game our way, and we enforce that, and we reap the rewards with the scores. And you kill the game off for Kilkenny at that stage. They're obviously going to have a little bit of a purple patch and they get a few scores. But there was never really a threat, Paul. They never, like, I think we would have answered most of their scores with one straight back, so that would be quite pleasing as well, you know, that worked. And like, that's what the management would want. That's what the players would want, that they'd have their own targets, at half time or as a defense, or as an attacking unit, and you'd imagine they would have hit most of those on Saturday. But the pleasing point was that when the game like those 10 minutes after half time, they're big minutes. Galway went out and won those. And, that again will bring confidence to guys that are new to all this, guys that are learning their trade.
I know the supporters won't be too worried about it, but our attendance is a concern. You look Saturday evening, 5,467. You look the week before, less than 5,000. And there were two big games if you think of it. Waterford was
Yeah.
a relegation shootout. And you think even after beating Waterford, I know the game's on TV and it's a Saturday evening and everything, but still. And then you look down at Cork and Limerick and you're seeing 19,000. Like, Galway play Kilkenny, as we mentioned, in 5 and 6 weeks, and you really be hoping, as hurling supporters, that over the next few weeks that work can be done somehow and you get that up to double digits because it's important for this team to make Pearse Stadium a fortress when it comes to the round robin series.
Absolutely, Paul. Look, of course, yeah. Look, hasn't that been the quandrum with the stadium? Like, we'll have different people talking that
Mm.
it's the stadium, it's going across town on a Saturday evening, it's this, that. Look at it, a bit of everything. It's the times we're living in, the cost of everything. There's so many factors maybe that all have a little bit to play in it. Of course, you'd like to see more in there. Like close to 5,500. You would love to see minimum 9,000. I think it was a nine for the Cork game. You'd love to have seen that type of numbers in there, and you know, but I think that will grow as well. And I've no doubt when Kilkenny rock in the championship, you know, we'll see huge numbers in there. We'll get people will be out to support. Look, and because Galway did what they did on Saturday evening, there'll be, I think the team will want to get behind them as well to show that, we're behind you lads. We want to go watch you. We want to see, there's a new generation, there's new heroes coming. Young kids will want to get out and support them. But I don't know what more they can do, Paul. Saturday evening. We've been crying out for lights, for games under lights. We're getting them now. So I think the people probably have to get out and start following the team. I know it's easy sitting on the couch and watch it, and we're still in, February, March conditions, but like some of the scores and some of the hurling that was done Saturday evening will be as good as anything you'll see because, the effort was huge from Galway. So, of course, you'd like to see more at the games, and the lads deserve to have more at the games. But I've no doubt come championship, especially for our home games, we're looking. I think we definitely have Kilkenny at home. I think we've Dublin at home as well. They're big
Yeah.
games. I think the crowd will come out for those. They will because this team is making progress, and you know maybe the last couple of years we've been in the doldrums a small bit, not knowing would we be where we be. Are we consistent? Are we not? I think there's still so much more to do, and the manager will tell you that, and the players will. But there's a bit of enthusiasm there, a bit of excitement in the hurling public. So I think people will row in behind that going forward, and it won't happen overnight in one league game and whatnot. But I can guarantee you, Paul, there'll be a good crowd from Galway going down to the Gaelic grounds Saturday week, because that game against Kilkenny would have generated more support and more following, and people will be itching to get back out and see them, So you can only hope it'll build as we go through the months.
Yeah, particularly if you, I think even chatting to a few people who maybe weren't hurling people throughout the week, I think there was people who were stunned with Galway winning by 18 points. I think that does generate a good bit of interest. It's I suppose we're probably nearly 30 or 40 minutes into this podcast. We haven't mentioned Aaron Island too much, but the first half, you could add a highlights reel of him. He was so impressive. And probably what impressed me with him too was he was given the free taking duties. He took it in his stride. Um, and you probably have to think now he's in pole position to be free taker this year.
Yeah, I think Galway have been quite sensible with them. You know how they've got him into that. They've given him the role of just going out and playing, maybe. For the first couple of games, as he's going into it, is what's expected of him has become greater. And I think from hearing about him and I worked with him briefly in academies in Galway a couple of years ago. He's nothing phases him. He's quite happy to take on whatever he's asked to do. He'll do it. Obviously had injury issues as well the last couple of years, but again, I think they've got on top of that with his S&C. Again, he's been well managed. Um, but yeah, he's a really really good prospect. A really quality forward. That can hurt teams. Will contribute on the scoreboard every day. Freeze and play. So you know we need that. We need you need a 9 out of 10, a 10 out of 10 free taker because that's what the top teams have. Um, and the fact that he's also chipping in with these scores from play, you can get his totals in double digits every day. It's definitely a positive.
Do you think even would put him on the freeze up call? Because obviously he's such a link man, and you even see the 6 points he gets man of the match. It just produces another typical Cathal Mannion performance like he has, particularly throughout the last 2 years of Donoghue's reign. But does that free up call because he is doing a lot of work in that number 11 channel?
Yeah, perhaps it does. I take from watching Carl like anyone else. I don't think Anton phases Carl. I think if he has to take the frees, he'll take them. There's no problem with it. What I liked about Carl the last day was his leadership on the whole thing. How he got to guys to have a chat to them when they needed a word in their ear, and still concentrate on his own game and hit his own scores and did all the right stuff on the ball. So I don't think so, Paul. I think Carl, if Carl was told mid game he had to take them, not a problem. If he's told he's not taking them, not a problem. I think he's at a stage in his career, the experience he has behind him. You know, he wants to play for Galway. He wants the team to win, and if that's taking the freeze, no problem. If it's not, that's no problem either. It's all about getting Galway over the line.
What do you make of the shape of the attack, how it's developing? Rory Burke obviously sends over a beautiful sideline cut there in the second half. And even I thought he was harshly done for charging in the first half against Lee Moore. But even his ability to get hits in really stood out on Saturday evening. Obviously, Neary's pace is bringing something probably a lot different to what we probably haven't had in a few years. Conor Whelan obviously gets his first start, and maybe Tom Monaghan then suited to playing that maybe drifting role more so than playing in midfield.
Yeah, I think you're seeing the best out of each of these players, their best pieces are coming together. I thought Rory's physicality in the half forward line was serious. The tackles. I know he got done for a few frees, but even his work rate and his tackle, and he turned you back as a defender. It's a nightmare. You're coming in with a ball or coming out with a ball, and this guy is standing up to you and forcing you back. His aerial ability. I think he plucked a puck out or two out of the sky as well. Or a long ball. So he added that. Then he has the line balls, so contributed from play. You know, Dara probably had missed a game or two, Dara Neary, so he took him a few plays to get into it, but again, continued on the vein of form he had in the early rounds, so definitely has strengthened the panel that way. And Conor Whelan, look at Conor needs the games. It looks, but I think the last 10, 15 minutes, I thought we saw the Conor of old, a couple of fine scores, a super catch, laying it off, goal chance created. But again, Paul, these guys are all doing that under pressure from the guys that are watching in and chomping at the bit to get on. Like you saw who we rolled out, Evan Nyland, Connor Cooney, these guys, TJ Brennan, Oshie Lohan came in, Jason Rabbit. These guys want to start as well. So there's
Colin
pressure.
Malloy wasn't used. Declan McLaughlin not in the 26.
So this is it. It's competition. So you know you're asked to do a job. Like even when you're playing the forwards now, you still have a role and you have a job and whatnot. So you've got to deliver on that. And there's consequences now if you don't, because there's someone else chomping at the bit to get in that is versed on what needs to be done. So that can only drive the standards. And I think, as we go on, we will see that, and that is of the whole league, I think the biggest aspect and the best one is that the consistency they've shown is that standards have stayed rising all the time, And like with a new team, Paul, you'd expect there'd be a game where you'd be a little bit flat or you get caught, or and who's to say it won't come? We don't know. But like there's been no off day. Everyone has risen to the challenge every day they've gone out. So like that's a very pleasing aspect, from the group. And I'm sure the group are happy with that, that they have a standard set and they're meeting that and rising above it day in, day out. And the forwards are doing that as well, like to score the scores they did, and not all of them got on the scoreboard, but Dara and those that are near, they contribute so much to what Galway are doing, you know, that their roles are as important as the lads that are putting it over the bar.
Obviously, there's still a couple of injuries. John Fleming is long term at the minute. Gavin Lee still out as well through injury. Daniel Loftus still out through injury. Burke, they're unsure of a timeline on his injury as well at the minute. So still there is a couple of injuries building there. But just on that attack, because obviously we've seen Aaron play 12 and in the half forward line at the early stages of the league. And you're looking at the makeup of a Galway full forward line. It seems like Aaron's probably more likely now to play in a corner. Conor Whelan's obviously played at 14, and Tom Monaghan then is playing 15 and playing that drifting role there. Does that sort of indicate that it's going to be Conor Whelan or Jason Rabbit?
Um, I'm not sure. You would think so, maybe. It's a hard one, Paul,
Mm.
because they're both can offer the same thing, but also can offer something totally different. If you understand me, their ball winning ability is huge. I think both of them have huge. Um, Connor's eye for goal. We haven't seen that in Jason yet because we haven't seen enough of him. And Connor's pace is huge. You know, it's like I would say with the management right now. I believe they back whoever's doing the business, regardless of like I would see. Could you see a full forward line of Conor Whelan, Jason Rabbit, and Aaron going Roman? You know, is that like would that be that'd be a super inside line if the two lads were in there. Their ball winning ability, both them score, frequently.
Particularly, we haven't seen how they work off each other together yet.
That's the key. And look at Jason probably got to sit out the start of the game the last day because of the Freshers final last Wednesday night. But could we see that against Limerick? Possibly. I think that's probably maybe something that needs to be looked at, or could be looked at, or it could be happening in training. So that's definitely. I wouldn't rule anyone in or out, to be honest, Paul, of this team because injuries will have a part to play. But I think there's such variety in all these guys. They're more than a one trick pony. They're ball winners, they're score getters, they're creators, and you can add two or three more into that mix, as well. So but I think a couple of more combinations. I think the manager would like to see, and I think that's we could see some of that against Limerick.
Just on Kilkenny, it's obviously going to be a different story, I think, in 5 or 6 weeks when they meet again in the Leinster Championship. But there is no point in saying otherwise for them. They obviously are to get Mikey Butler, TJ Eden, Adrian Mullen back in it. They'll obviously strengthen things. Now, for them, Mikey Carey, that looked like a nasty enough hamstring injury and could come under pressure now. But Derek Ling is surely going to want a big improvement, but it's worrying in one aspect to get a beating like this at any stage throughout the year.
Yeah, it has to be Paul. And obviously we'd all heard the issues with maybe a virus in the camp, and obviously the players you've mentioned there to come back, but it's just so unlike Kilkenny, to see them wilt away like that game. That game was probably over after 25, 30 minutes, to be honest, because you couldn't see how they were playing. Um, that they were going to raise a gallop in the second half against the wind. That's mine the first half with it. So, it'd be very worrying for Derek. And he was quite honest and quite hurt after the game with the performance. Where they go, look at they'll be a different animal when they come to the stadium in 6 weeks' time because they'll bottle that hurt, that bus journey home back to Kilkenny on Saturday evening. That'll resonate with them for quite a few training sessions, and Derek will be he has a big stick to beat them with, have the capabilities of closing that 18-point gap. Of course, it's Kilkenny, so of course they have. But um, you know, there's definitely a lot of soul searching, a lot of questions to be asked down there, and their style of play. Where is that going? Are they? are they caught between how they played last year or 2 years ago and how they're trying to play this year? I don't know. I didn't like I mentioned it earlier. Like they gave up so many short puck outs, you know, in the first half. It like Galway were out of defence in 1-2 passes, against the breeze. So it's like, you know, that type of stuff, and look at Derek, I'm sure, look at all that, and his management team will look at all that. But they have a lot of work to do, but if anyone can do it and anyone can close the gaps, and I'm sure they're delighted it's Galway they have in the first round of the Leinster Championship, and they've got to come back and do the exact same lines. Then that'll they'll be wetting their lips with it. But for Galway,
I think it's fantastic for the Leinster Championship.
I agree with you, Paul. I think that could that we were talking about crowds earlier. Like, that would want to bring a crowd. Kilkenny people will even want to come because they'll want to see a response in their team. Neutrals will come to see will there be a response. The Galway people are going to be out supporting their team because we believe that we were better than them this year because we've beaten them so heavily in the league. So Galway supporters will come with a pep in their step. So it'll add to the whole thing. So um, but again, like Kilkenny will come a wounded, Kilkenny, and that's dangerous. Um, but look at the Galway can just concentrate on themselves and keep getting better. Between now and then, they have Limerick and perhaps a league final if we're lucky enough to get over that and results and whatnot. But all Galway want is to get their next game, and Kilkenny is down the track. You have one eye on it, but right now you're just developing your panel and making it stronger and your style of play. And what Kane Killian bring, I've no doubt Galway will be ready for.
Just on this Limerick game coming up, obviously Saturday week, Gaelic grounds coming up against Limerick. If Galway beat Limerick and Cork beat Offaly, it's going to be a Galway Cork league final. If Galway don't get a result, it's likely going to be a Limerick Cork league final there. Losing to Limerick last year in the Gaelic grounds was a big setback, particularly how comprehensively and probably how easy it was for them. So that should already focus the mind, I suppose, for Galway making the trip down to Limerick.
Yeah, it should. It should. But I think the one thing, if you're a supporter, if you're like, as I keep going back to, if you've been watching these guys, like right now, they've ticked all the boxes, in their effort and their application and how they wanted to play and their energy. And I think that's what we'll want against Limerick. Like we have a relatively, 5, 6 new guys again going down to the Gaelic grounds, playing an exceptional team that are, household names, stars all over. So it's another test for Galway. It's another test of their character, their teamwork, their energy, how they want to play. All that will be laid on the table again Saturday week. So I think as a management, you're thinking, oh, geez, yeah, we want to get to the league final. We'd love to, but realistically, we want you know, another game where we're consistent from start to finish, where we're hitting the tackles hard, playing our game regardless of the result. We're playing our game how we want to play, and getting better at doing it, and hopefully come out without any injuries. That they're the boxes the management will, I'm sure, will want to tick, and if the result comes from that, even better.
What do you reckon, Joe? Do you reckon it's maybe in one sense good to get close to Limerick? Not that I suppose the players will be going down, I suppose, thinking that they're going down obviously to win the game, but if you're looking at this Galway team, you think in one sense in your head, it's not the worst thing if you go down to the Gaelic grounds if whatever they lose by 2 or 3 points and are really competitive, and then I suppose they get that block. I know Portugal is penciled in the diary at some stage to go on a training camp before they play Kilkenny. Or are you thinking maybe now the natural progression for this team is to go down to the Gaelic grounds, overturn Limerick, and I suppose put themselves into a league final?
I'm sure they'd love to. I'm sure the older guys in that would be they'd love that. They'd love that in their CV or in their bank of experience. For the younger guys, that we've gone down to their home ground, we've taken them on, we went toe to toe and we've won it. I'm sure that that would be a huge confidence boost further. But I think for the trajectory of this team, I'm not sure that's exactly what's needed right now. What I think the players will want is that level of consistency that we had from the start of the league right up to now. Can we go even another step higher? Can we be better against Limerick? And that will be measured on the performance. And when they sit down to do the video analysis after, that'll all weigh up. The result, as I said to you there, will take care of itself. It would be huge for the group if they could, but knowing probably this management, it won't be long left to side. We'll move on to whatever's next. It'll be banked and it'll be huge experience and it'll give us confidence. But I think, it won't define them either if they were to lose it by a couple of points once the performance matches what we've been doing to date.
Yeah, because ultimately it really is all about that Kilkenny game as
Yeah,
important as the league is really.
yeah, it is. It is because like like we hear so much that the Leinster Championship isn't competitive as Munster, and that could be the case. But at the same time, these games are hard won. Like the Galway players will tell you that. Like you know, to go to down to Wexford Park, and obviously we're looking Kilkenny and Dublin are coming, but like they're not easy. They're not easy. Like Dublin are on a decent trajectory as well. Kilkenny are a wounded animal, so these games aren't easy. So you've got to play to your level and try and rise above what the opposition is. So, and again, I go back to it. I think that's what Galway have been trying to do during the league. They've been trying to raise their performances as they've gone through it, and they did that last Saturday. So they'll be able to do that against Limerick. They'll be able to do it against Kilkenny, and as they go through, but Kilkenny is the big focus. With obviously, they'll always have one eye on that for the championship, but it's all about making that progress. You know, getting these players ready for the championship, and have as much done on their style of play and their game plan and their puck outs and all that goes with that. Get as many games as they can to do that, and then be ready for the big one in April.
I was actually up today, Joe, up in Presentation College, Athenry, carrying out a couple of interviews ahead of their big Croke Cup final with Kieran's. Was speaking with Ronan Badger, the goalkeeper, Cathal Mannion, and Niall Kelly. It's actually really interesting because the turnover in the Pres Athenry compared to, I suppose, the team that narrowly lost to Turles last year. It's actually quite a big turnover, and a couple of these players who are lining out now against Kieran's, a couple of them were actually in the stand last year as supporters, which is I thought it was so interesting to hear. But you can feel the excitement, and to be honest, what an achievement this is for Pres Athenry when you consider it being without Frank Burke and Ronan Murphy for the majority of this campaign to get themselves back into their second consecutive final. I think it's a massive achievement.
It's huge, Paul. It is. It's a credit to them. It's a credit to the work that's gone on up there. They've been so competitive at the top table in colleges. For the last couple of years, and that's probably coming. Like you look at the college championship, you look at Rayfields obviously are pushing hard. The Pres, Portumna, all those teams are fighting hard. Gart, they're fighting hard, but the Pres have been back to the final again with probably less of a star-studded team as we had last year, obviously with Aaron and with Jason and those. But it's like to see those guys, captained by Ronan McGlynn, and these guys are really good hurlers. They're really, Shea Brady's in a fine vein of form, so they're been driven on. The hurt of last year is in them, but to keep coming back, it's a testament to the work, as I said, that's going on, and to the clubs that are involved in that. The Athenrys, Clare Bridges, the Turloughmores, Crowell, Abinochmoy, these are all Clymer Daly. These clubs it goes back to they're feeding in real quality players into these schools. And then if the likes of Ronan and the guys in the schools, Paul Hooton, all these coaches that are able to gel them together. Cathal Moore, obviously the principal there, is a huge part of that as well. Like so, it's brilliant. And you've seen it, Paul. You spoke about it. The lads that we spoke about there, Jason and everything. These guys have gone on. Sean Murphy. These guys have gone on to be on the Galway senior panel. You know, so it's a huge stepping stone. College hurling. And even the Larray team that lost the Connacht final, like those guys are quality hurlers as well. So it's such a benefit to Galway that these colleges are doing so well. And we hope that the Preds can get over the line, because they surely deserve one. They've been so close. So,
Yeah,
no,
they've lost three finals to
yeah.
two Kieran's.
Mm.
in the last decade. So you just be hoping. There's been so many close calls.
Totally, and three really good teams they've had as well, Paul. Like the Prez they've been really strong. So you'd be wishing them all the best, and hopefully they can get the job done this time around.
It was interesting even talking to them. Obviously, Mike Finn as well, who's involved in the management team. He's been there for quite a while, and Cathal Moore as well. Like they're obviously desperate for, I suppose, Pres Athenry to lift the Croke Cup. But even from a Galway context, like if it probably in so many cases Tipperary's probably been a reference point for Galway when you look at last year and where they were before they won the All Ireland. But from what they've got from the Croke Cup winning teams over the last few years, I think it would be massive because obviously Rifles are the only Galway school to win the Croke Cup, and you really have to go back quite a while for that too.
Yeah, you do, Paul. Like it's we've mentioned it. Look at what's come off the Prez team from last year. So it is huge. Look at the majority. A lot of the Tipperary guys have gone on to their senior panel, the colleges down there. So it's a huge stepping stone because it's taken so seriously now, and so much effort and time and coaching and work is put into it. And you know, every club, they want to have players on it. They want to have players involved in it. So it's it would be huge. And especially for the Prez, the fact that as you mentioned, they've lost the three, so that hurts. And they lost it with three really strong teams. Where they would have been, had their own belief that they would win it. But this team has got in there. I know last weekend Flannan's hit, was it 19 wides and and whatnot, but Prez still went about their business and won the game, and were the better team for huge, long periods of that game. So this could be their time. This could be the year. Hopefully, it is. As I said, the benefits to Galway hurling going forward are huge because you're introducing these guys to Croke Park, to a final, an All Ireland final. High stakes. Quality hurling. So like that can only be beneficial for the Galway under 20s, the Galway minors, as and even the seniors as the lads develop.
Yeah, no, Bronan Callan and Keen Hannon combined for 1-4 against Flannans, but obviously, when you mention Brett Attenborough, you have to mention Kieran Lean. The scores this man has been racking up, and obviously, he was part of the Galway senior squad too earlier in the year in a 20s campaign to come. But he's another forward that I think supporters can easily get excited about.
Yeah, they can. And I think we've seen him as well at club action last year. He was showing promise then, and a really good lad by all accounts as well. So he was Italian. I think in the Connacht final he was exceptional as well against Rayfields. So a real prospect. Big strong man, great stick, great hands. Good stick man. So this team, that they obviously depend on him quite heavily for scores, but as you mentioned, Roland as well chips in quite heavily. So Athenry have a nice bring, of players in there as well. But I think if Kieran can get a bit of freedom in Croke Park, I think you could see a big performance from him. And I think he'll bring the lads the lads around him into it quite more as well, and they just have a feeling the likes of Ronan McLean around the middle of the pitch, Shane the backs, those guys, they have a bit of experience now. They'll drive it on. You obviously have Robert Burke. You've really quality good hurlers in that team.
Yeah, obviously, I think they can take a lot of confidence too from the way Rifles performed against Kieran's, like up to until Gavin Maher got sent off. Like Rifles were in serious control, up by 5 points, and obviously, Kieran's just produced a scoring blitz in that last quarter to get over the line. And you look the last day, they obviously get a goal later on against Nino CBS to steal it. David Berko, obviously, he's a Kilkenny senior. He's a big man there at centre halfback, and Jake Mullen, obviously younger brother of Adrian, going to be two key players to shut down for them on Tuesday.
Yeah, they seem to be a team that when you look at the results, I obviously haven't. I've seen bits of clips of last weekend's game. They're definitely a team that don't throw in the towel, do they? They
Yeah.
they stay fighting. Rayfields really had them on the rack. The sending off was huge. Obviously, they had clawed back into the game at that stage, but sending off was a big one. But they didn't throw in the towel. They were always coming, coming, coming. Even the last day, that late goal, you know, they're 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 typically Kilkenny team. We've talked about Kilkenny for a while this evening, but they have belief. They'll believe that they're better than the Prez. They'll believe they're going to win it. They have history, they have tradition. But I just think there's something about this Prez team. They're very, work like they work very hard as a team. They'll fight in the end as well. They had to earn it to beat Rayfields. They really did, and even as you said, Flannan. So they haven't come through the easy way either. They've had tough games. So um, I think that could stand to them. I think as good and all as some of the Kieran's players are, I think the President players, they can stand up to them and outmatch them.
Yeah, exactly. And at Tulla, the beef semi-final at the weekend, Portumna desperately unlucky against Tralee CBS, lost by two, 119 to 20 points. Probably the decisive moment probably was midway through that second half when Kelly's penalty was saved by the Tralee CBS goalkeeper, but they could be really proud of their year. Iarla Kelly finished up with 9 points. Joe Canning's nephew, finishing up with 6 points. So they scored 15 points out of Portumna's 20 points between them. And then Clonfert College were unlucky too in their semi-final against Barcelona. But I think on an overall context, even as you go down to B and C there, Joe, it's just, I suppose, great to see these Galway colleges competitive at all these levels.
It is, Paul. It is because like you obviously read the college, read Portsmouth College, but that's the surrounding areas as well. Like you're looking at Teen Abbage and Ari and all those surrounding clubs that are feeding players in there. So every club is benefiting from these All Irelands because these players are getting huge exposure, huge, game time, and it can only improve the club game in Galway because these guys are playing at a top level. Of course they'd be disappointed. And both teams were in with serious chances, but sometimes you just don't get the rub of the green, and things don't pan out the way you want them. But I think in general, I think once the school year is over, sport wise, they can look back and say, we had a tremendous year winning our provincial championships and going all the way to the All Irelands, which is no mean feat. I know it's disappointing to lose them, but for each player and each club that a player is involved, I think they should be extremely proud of themselves. Because it's the work that's going on at club level and in the schools that's going to drive Galway hurling up another level.
It was a point actually Mike Finn raised when he was on the podcast about, I suppose, seeing, I suppose, more time maybe where these schools can get with people working in post-primary hurling. Because if you look in at the Pres Athenry, obviously, as we mentioned, you do have Mike Finn, Ronan Badger, Gary Maroney there, but you've had Paul Hubban previously, you've had Carl Moore, you look over at Bridget's, or obviously you have Port Breheny too, actually, in the Pres Athenry, but you look over at Bridget's, Johnny Cohn, David Burke, you look at Rafels, Ronan Hardyman and Franny Ford, you look in Clare Galway, Cyril Donlan, even the last day Portumna, TJ Brennan involved with them, even with Clonfert, you had Emmett Manley, Mark Gill, like there's, and this is just across all the schools, just to name a few. There's fantastic people there, and it's probably just about getting them more and more working with these coaches because there's great work going in here.
100%. Like we've some great coaches in the schools, and you can see that, and it's no
It's not
accident
to
that
forget actually Coons Blakely as well, I suppose.
there's 100%.
There's
There's quite a few strong candidates there as well. But no, totally, Paul. I totally understand what you're saying. Like these guys have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of experience, and they're bringing it to the table. They're passing it on to these players, and you can see the benefit in that. As I said, Rayfields was in a whisker. The Prez are there. Portumna and Clonfert both made their finals. So like that's testament to all, as I said, I mentioned to the club, but to those guys in the schools as well that are given their time, but given their knowledge, and there is a wealth of knowledge in there. These guys have all played at the top level or played top level at club or whatever it is, but the work they're doing, as I keep coming back to it's a huge benefit, and we will see it as the years go on that our school standard is raising all the time. And that's down to the schools buying into it, the schools want to have success, and the teachers in the schools, you know, giving their time and efforts.
great stuff. That's all we do have time for on today's show. Joe, thanks a million for coming on to this week's podcast.
Pleasure, Paul.